It will be Christmas Day 2023. Not a lot of time left for Brad Stine Has Issues 2023. So I thought I'd give you a little early Christmas gift. My witty and unique opening monologue that launches us into Brad Stine Has Issues episode. I'm going to pass to my son Wyatt, and I'm going to let him open the show. Merry Christmas, folks. Take it, son.
Oh, so that's what we're doing this week. I see. Can't think of anything nice to say to the audience, so you pawned it off on me last minute. Well, I've already forgotten what on earth I'm supposed to be talking about, so I guess we're at an impasse today. Ah, take that. You enjoying your, what is that, tea, cocoa, coffee? What is that? You don't know. You're just drinking some random liquid you found in the freezer. Okay, no, but seriously, I have completely forgotten what I'm supposed to be saying.
You're opening up the episode.
Ah, yes. I'm opening up the episode. How could I forget? Okay, so here's what I've got to say, and it sounds a little bit like this.
Oh, ho, 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 it is 1 week before Christmas. This is God's Comic Brad Stine, and Brad Stine Has Issues where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. I don't think anything makes my Christmas wish more robust and clear than the fact that we've spent a year, maybe two, with me and my son running this podcast, and every week Wyatt gets a little dig in about how I'm just the big old head in front of the camera. I'm just the guy that's on this side, but I don't have buttons. I don't have responsibilities. My job is simple. So for the first time in our podcast history, I punted. I said, "Here, son, here's the easiest part. Just take this and just slide us right into the episode." And then he just panicked. Didn't know what to say, completely scrubbed it. So even when you were given your chance to star as the host, you completely melted down.
Look,
it was a beauty to behold.
Few things that you're forgetting. Number one, you've had an entire week to prepare an opening statement. I've had a whole 7 seconds.
Oh, did I have a week to prepare?
Yes. Listen, if you choose not to spend that week preparing, that's your fault. But you did have a week.
And how many times do you think I actually spent preparing for my opening monologue? How much time do you think I do?
Apparently a lot less than you should.
Yeah, I just make it up off the fly. So I tried to prove my point, and that is, apparently it's hard.
Importantly, you weren't asking me to start the show. You were asking me to start your show.
Yeah. Well, it's our show.
I would have to make my opening fit within your show. Your opening. It ain't my show. I can't say whatever. I've got to stick to your script.
No, you don't, because there is no script. That's the point, son.
No,
there's absolutely no script.
There is a cadence to how you talk. There is a method to your madness, and if I don't match that, then it's just not gonna sound well.
No.
It's like if we just started having an entire episode about beans. It's not gonna really fit in with Brad Stine Has Issues, now is it? Even though I could technically talk about it, nothing's stopping me.
Why?
If you wanted me to star on the podcast, it had to be my podcast, not your podcast guest starring me.
It was so bad. It was so bad. I was embarrassed for you. You're my son. I was embarrassed for you because it's like he literally can't think on his feet.
No.
He's just completely crashing and burning.
It's not that I couldn't think on my feet. I didn't know I had to.
Yeah. Had feet?
No, think on my feet.
You said you had to.
literally thought there was an opening bit. I didn't even know it was supposed to be an opening because we never planned for this.
Yeah, no, I didn't plan. I decided just to see what you
And
do.
you didn't tell me.
Because you're usually clever and you usually come up with something. But this time, it was just terrible. It
Yeah,
was
no, I did
terrible.
exactly what
and
I-
it was a Christmas gift I was trying to give our people, and you pooped on it.
I did exactly what I thought you wanted me to do. If that's not what you wanted, you should have said something.
You want me to say something? Let me say this. Nick Kress, Carrie Tudor, and guess who joined the Watching Creep Club? Michael Quackenbush.
Oh, Quackenbush!
Quacky's watching with them. All three are just watching in their sneaky mannerism. But you know who else is there? Conn Boyd. She made it number 2, and it's tons of Christmas trees. Merry Christmas, and then some sweet little hearts, and then Jim Brona. His money, let's go. Because Jim's a big fan, and he loves the work. He's sad, he's weeping because of your horrible monologue, but he can't wait for me to get going. Deanna Miller, greetings and Merry Christmas. Nick Kress, the talking head and the talking disembodied voice. That's right. Chris Felthausen, hello. Rebecca Daly Dwyer, Merry Christmas. And then Ashley replied to Karen, pagan Christmas trees.
Yeah. And? Continue.
All right. There's this listener viewer called Ashley Haas.
Yeah.
Now she does plays at her area, creates plays for her community, and she's a piano teacher.
Yep.
She teaches people how to play the piano. Yep. Yeah. So she's an artist, right? And sweet little gal.
Yep.
But she has a deep belief that Christmas trees are pagan.
Why?
Well, she was raised in Illinois, and as you know, Illinois is an Iroquois word for everything scary. And she grew up with this idea that pagan, at hundreds of years ago, would cut trees down, bring them into their homes, and then they would, I guess, put candles on them, do all kinds of pagan-y stuff. And I don't know what pagans do, because to be perfectly honest with you, White, I'm not a pagan aficionado, so who knows what they do. Maybe they eat Jell-O. Maybe you mentioned beans earlier. Perhaps they count beans. Maybe they make trails of beans. Maybe they make bean necklaces as a way to make some money on their pagan tourist trap, and I'm sure pagans have them. How are they going to fund their paganism if they don't have a tourist trap, son?
Tax fraud?
Well, that goes without saying.
I guess that was sort of low-hanging fruit. I
Tax fraud. So here's the deal. Here's what bothers me about. See, you're funny.
yeah.
That made me laugh. I didn't see.
Exactly.
See, that's what you're good at. You have a dry sense of humor,
Yeah.
which means your stuff comes out of left field.
Yeah.
Do you know what that means to come out of left field?
Yes.
What?
It means it's unexpected. It's not the most obvious conclusion to the setup.
Yes, and normally it almost doesn't even congeal, and that's what makes it even funnier.
Which also makes it terrible for an opening show thing, which is why I couldn't do that. I can't just talk about a non sequitur and then theme music. I need to know what we're talking about for the episode, because that's what an introduction does. It introduces.
Wyatt, I never introduce what's coming on I just make crap up.
And that's why we have, 20 views? Yeah, 31 views. If you were to just tie things together from the beginning, you wouldn't have this problem, I think.
So you're saying we double our viewership if I actually worked on
What
my
I'm
monologue.
saying is we've never done it, so you can't say I'm wrong about it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, listen, here's what's the deal. Here's something I wanted to ask you about, and it's a perfect timing, and Ashley brought it up, so we might as well just keep moving with it. What's your thoughts on Christmas trees? Because I hear a lot of people saying, you can't be a Christian and have a Christmas tree because it's a pagan tradition, and all you Christians did was steal it. You stole the pagan tradition, and now you're doing it. Son, what's your thoughts on that? Does that make sense?
I mean, it's very similar to me then so you know the okay sign that you do when I say, hey, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, sort of like to index and that. So for billions of years, that was a unified symbol that meant.
I know you're good at math. I just want to make sure I clarify.
It's
For billions
of
years, they've been doing the okay.
It's called hyperbole.
I see.
Learn something.
How old is hyperbole? How old was that? Was that a couple billion years old, that one?
That predates the discovery of time.
Okay. Woo! You are literally living hyperbole, which is onomatopoeia.
Which is a tradition.
Onomatopoeia. What's it called?
Onomatopoeia?
Onomatopoeia.
No, it's not. Onomatopoeia is when a word sounds like what it is. Like
I thought it was.
Boom.
Yeah.
Sounds like an explosion.
Or zip.
Yeah, sounds like me stopping to talk.
All right, so go ahead.
Anyway, so recently, that has now been designated as a, how do they describe it? Basically, it's considered hate speech because it's white power now.
White power?
Yeah.
To be okay is white power?
No, to give the hand signal.
Who voted on that?
No one. People just accepted it as fact.
Who accepted it as fact? I don't.
I don't either.
Well, then why are we acting as though it's legit?
Well, you see, here's the thing. Because some people decided they were going to take this universally accepted thing and steal it, make it their own.
Or besmirch it.
Exactly. I'd say that that's very similar to this whole Christmas tree situation. So what if we stole it? We're not using it for the same purpose, so who cares? We've got our reason, you've got your reason. No need to fight about it.
Well, but in the Ten Commandments it says, thou shalt not steal.
Okay, but how do we define stealing in this case? And when I say that it is stolen, am I saying we have taken something of physical value, or am I simply using it as a means of describing the act of taking something and being inspired by it to the point of referencing it directly? Honestly, that's more the concept of like pirating things. You know what pirating is?
Stealing.
No. Pirating, by definition, you make a copy of something and you distribute it online. It's not stealing, technically, because if you pirate something, the original is still there. You're just making a copy.
Yes, but someone is making money off of it.
No, they're not. Pirating, by definition, the whole point of pirating is that you get stuff for free. It's not, I'm making money, it's, you're not making money.
You're stealing money royalties I should have made, though.
I'm not stealing it, you're just not making it.
Yeah, but you're stealing potential money that has gone out of my bank account.
But
because my material is being broadcast, people are getting its value, but I didn't get paid for the intellectual property I created.
Yes,
and I know because
saying,
I've written 6 albums of comedy all by my lonesome. Don't have anybody writing for me. Certainly don't have you writing for me. I thought I was going to use you to help me with a monologue once, and then I thought, I'm going to think twice.
I'm not saying it's ethical.
Yeah.
At all. But let me give you an example of when I think it is. I want to play this game.
Yeah.
The people who made the game have stopped selling it. It is physically impossible to buy it anywhere.
Okay.
I want to play it. How am I going to do it?
You make your own copy, your own version. A counterfeit.
Now
a pirated version is what I would call it.
Exactly. Is that ethical, though? To steal, is it ethical to quote-unquote steal something that you had no other way of getting? If it doesn't hurt anyone to do so. Again, you're not taking the physical thing, you're just making a copy.
You replicate, you're counterfeiting it. Have you ever heard of the word forgery?
Yes, I have. A forgery is a fake. It is designed to look real. I fail to see what that has to do with this. Because I'm not making a fake. I'm just taking the real, making a copy of it, and using that. A forgery, by definition, is a fake that's trying to pass itself off as real.
Okay.
This isn't fake. This is the genuine, real thing. It's just a copy of it. It's not the original. That doesn't make it fake.
All right. So that's. I mean, it was hard coming out of your mouth, and it was convoluted. But I got to say, in some odd, sick way, It made sense, and it was convincing.
It's definitely one of those things that's definitely a lot easier to get the second time.
Anyways, I don't want to be disparaging pirates on such a beautiful day.
So I guess the more of my pirate talk is that's what Christmas trees are about to me.
They're pirated.
Well, you see, here's the thing. I'm just gonna clip this section of me saying that and post it online and see how many people get confused over it.
Well, that should be a tally that we should try to...
We gotta drive viewers somehow, and I'd say non sequitur is the perfect way.
Oh, my Lord. Do you know Non Sequitur is the name of my first band?
I mean, they opened for the Rolling Stones in 1907, but, unfortunately, the Wright brothers...
No, only Keith Richards was alive at that point. Listen, I gotta say something.
Yeah, I know.
I gotta tell you, here's my take on the Christmas tree issue that I didn't want to bring up, but Ashley's always bringing it up. She won't keep her mouth shut about the trees.
Just make sure it's less convoluted than my attempt, please.
No, yours was good, actually.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. All right. So my take is this. Number one, if you are a Christ believer, that he's actually God, let's just say that's actually what you believe to be true, then that means he invented, created from ex nihilo, trees. They didn't exist, and then he said, let there be trees during the time he was making, flowers and whatever that would be called, agricultural things and stuff along that line. Trees fit in that category, right? So he invented trees. So the original fir tree, since that's what we usually use for our Christmas tree, was invented by God. Now, he invented it for what reason? To worship it? No, nobody worshipped it. Did he invent it to for you to look at it as though you are equal to this? No. He made it for humans to enjoy, to appreciate, to smell the fragrance of the fir needles, to feel the texture of them in your skin, especially when you take the tree and you wrap it in your face and scrape it back and forth. Do you do that?
You mean the time-honored tradition, Christmas tree sandpapering?
Yes. Anyways, maybe it's just our family tradition, but nevertheless, there it is, enjoying all the accoutrement of the tree. Okay, so God then said, I give you everything I have created. I give it all to you. Get the ducks. Why? He gave us ducks.
Can you take them back, please?
No, he loves the ducks, and he wants you to have the ducks. But then he said, and just to keep you on your toes, I'm giving you platypuses. Nevertheless, here he is, and then he gave us trees, and he gave us rocks, and he gave us the sun, right? Okay, so we began to appreciate God's handiwork. He said, now you go forth, and you take dominion over these things. You see what you can use from the trees. Maybe the bark of a tree might turn into, I don't know, say aspirin someday. And it did. The Indians figured that one out. I guess they're the ones that did. He gave us rocks. He said, if you fashion these into 10-ton boulders, perhaps you can create a pyramid someday. But we did. And so here we sit with this creation that God gave us to use as we choose. Now, pagans came along and they said, listen, we are part of nature, right? They're usually animists. They believe that they and nature are one, that nature is alive, it can think, it has a soul, the world has a soul. This is what climate change committers are. These are people that worship the earth, they worship climate, they believe that we are equal to it, and thus we need to nurture it like it because it's a delicate flower that can't survive without us, right? And that we can break it, And so here we sit, and the pagans come in and they say, hey, we've decided we're making God up on the fly. making them up on the fly. And we're going to worship the tree. We're going to bring the tree in because the tree has the soul of some kind of, I don't even know what kind of a God would live in a tree and make you think, this tree is really superior to me. I'm going to worship this tree. Even though you had to cut the tree down, it can't cut you down. You had to bring it into your hut. It couldn't walk in on its own, thus giving the indication that you're superior to the tree. You had to set it up or it would have just flopped over. You had to put stuff on it and decide using your ability to think and reason and have artistic acumen to say, let's put a kettle here, let's hang this there, and let's put maybe some beef jerky over there, because they probably were drying their meat on it. Who knows, Wyatt? You don't know. Don't start questioning my acumen when it comes to pagan rituals. And so then they put it all together and they worship it. Now, let's say they did that on, the winter solstice, and they said, this is when sort of the darkest day of winter, and then we're going to start flipping over, and eventually maybe life will come back, and so we're going to worship this God, and this is what this tree is. And Christians came along and said, I appreciate that you enjoy this tree, and that you think it smells good, so do we, and you think it's pretty, and so do we, and yet you think maybe we can bring it in and use it as an aesthetic delight inside of your house, and hey, we like to do that as well, and perhaps you can hang some things on it, make it prettier, and give it a functionality it wasn't designed to, but you're a human, you can create things from whole cloth, because you are like God, you are less than God, but you are like Him, and that you can create. He gave you logic and reason, inductive and deductive reasoning, and aesthetic acumen to be able to make choices that you can consider beautiful or pretty or elegant. And so this is what makes humans different than the tree. The tree, by the way, doesn't know any of this is going on, because the tree is essentially a vegetable. It's not sitting there going, maybe you could hang the star a little bit higher. It's not going, can you put the tinsel a little bit lower? It might fit better, maybe. Tree, it doesn't know what's going on. Why? Because we're humans and it's a tree. You're worshiping it, which should give you reason to suspect maybe their religion is for idiots. But nevertheless, you want to live and worship trees, pagan? Be my guest. You want to choose this date for whatever reason? Be my guest. Christians come along and say, I got an idea. There was a time when a God, the ultimate God, the only God, dimensionalized himself. He's a spirit, so the only way I can see him with five senses and three-dimensional aspects of comporting to reality, you're going to have to become part of the material world. It's the only way I can see you, because I'm only designed to interpret the material world. So God becomes flesh. He becomes one of his very creation. And we say to ourselves, we have decided to take this pagan bullcrap date, and we're going to redeem it. We're going to give it a significance that it actually could comport to what could be helpful to you, pagan, and that is not to worship the tree, but to be grateful for the tree given you by the architect of trees, and know that in fact God is here, and he's not in the tree, and he's not the tree. He made the tree. And so you can now bring in these trees and you can smell them and you say, thank you, God, because now this represents life to us. Evergreen tree, it's always life, and it represents our ability to have the fragrances and the smells that God created at creation, and it allows us to decorate and do beautiful things. Just like when we bring flowers into our house. I'm guessing some pagan worships a flower. Any of you women out there worried about the pagan worship of Christmas trees, going to tell your husbands, I don't want a dozen roses on Valentine's Day, because you know they're pagan, right? You know those roses are pagan. And when you smell them and you look at them and you put them in a vase, you're worshiping a dead flower. You understand that. It's pagan, right? So no more flowers for you ladies. By the way, the chocolate you want, can't have that. You're worshiping the cocoa bean that makes chocolate. Oh, and the sugar cane that was living like a god, and you cut it down and you process that sugar, you stuck it in there. You're worshiping candy. You can't have candy anymore. Does any of that make sense? No. None of that makes sense to any of you watching except Wyatt, because he's not following along. He probably fell asleep 5 minutes into this monologue.
No, I didn't fall asleep 5 minutes into this monologue. I just got lost and have been looking for directions ever since.
Well, I will say this then. Let me get you back to True North.
Yeah?
The North Star, the representation of the wise men trying to discover if in fact God has fulfilled his prophecy, he would become part of the human experience, is what we celebrate on December 25th. Is it Jesus' birthday? No. If you ask people when is his birthday, you know what they'll say? We don't know. So if you don't know, then why can't you choose a day to represent his birthday? Okay? But if this is still bothering you because you somehow think there's a pagan connection to this, be consistent. Be consistent. Don't use the days of the weeks anymore, because remember, they were named after Roman gods. Don't use the months of the year because they were named after gods, Roman gods, I believe. Don't name the planets, all named after gods. Just get rid of every possible access that people use to delineate time or space or give a title so they can sort of justify what it means or where it is, where it's going in the process of gravitational forces and circulating around the heliocentric, if you believe in that, universe. And dump it all. But if you're going to be so weak in your faith that you believe that Jesus Christ can't overcome a tree, and that the pagans who stole the tree in the first place because it was never theirs, they don't get to take a tree, bring it in and say, this is ours. You all got to know from this day forward, if you ever look at a tree or touch a tree or like a tree, you're worshiping our God. You don't get to make those rules. It's like somebody would steal a rainbow and then decide, I know the rainbow meant God's promise he would never destroy the earth again with a flood, and say, no, now it means something else. Now, who would do that? Who would do that? You'd catch him doing that. But nevertheless, nobody has the right to claim a universal symbol and or a universal created order and decide it's ours. You can worship it if you want. You can put it in your category, but it wasn't yours in the first place. So Christians aren't stealing pagan traditions. We're simply taking back creation that was God's all along. I think that deserves a boom, son.
Well, we don't have a sound effect for that, so...
Nothing?
Boom.
We don't have any explosion on our button of effects?
Let me
Our button?
We've got... I've got an intro, laugh, applause,
You took notes?
Yeah, I did.
Aw.
I got the rim shot, but a bing.
We don't have any...
No, which I guess means we play this one.
Dang it. Well, I'm going to go back in here for a second and see where I got confused. I wonder if Ashley's crying somewhere now. Karen Boyd, what was wrong with your week, Wyatt? She's nailing you, and this is going way back to your sucky monologue. Greg Smith, Merry Christmas with a capital C, Brad and White. What does he mean by Christmas with a capital C, Wyatt?
I mean, it's the movie you were in. It's the song that you're in.
Oh, you don't have to bring that up.
I know
I wasn't trying to get some kind of pat on the back.
I don't have to. I want to.
Wyatt, guess who's here? Forrest Bainey. Who's got the coolest name in town?
Forrest Bainey.
You better believe it. Fi, Brian Wyatt, Merry Christmas. Is Loin Boy going to be the Grinch this year? He sure is. Kerry Tudor. Hey, Brad and White and all the peeps. Sorry I missed last week. I fell asleep. Saw you all in repeat. Glad you all are here. If not, next week, Merry Christmas. Thank you, Carrie. Paula Faye Marie Rauchi, called Flying by the Seat of Your Pants. You know, Paula Faye Marie Rauchi is my favorite.
Four-named lady?
You got it. Danny here. Danny's here. Why? She's here.
Yeah, she's here
Folks,
most weeks.
Just take a moment. Listen carefully. Let me speak for Danny. She can't speak loudly. She whispers, even in her texts. because she's under the Trudeau tyranny. Here we go. Hello, Brad and Wyatt. It's me, Danny. Stuck in a blizzard on a highway in a truck with my husband. Data is choppy. If it cuts out, God bless you both and everyone here. Merry Christmas and many blessings. If I don't continue to communicate, it means Trudeau has finally got me. I'm going to ask Karen Boyd and Nick Crass, Tencel Sizemore and David N. Todd to get a posse together and come look for us. I would recommend snow dogs, sleds, shoehorns, and fur-ish things to wear on the regular basis. That's what she wrote. Now, I can't speak for her, but she's in distress, son. Merry Christmas, Danny. I hope we don't have to pull you out of a snowbank. Tencel Sizemore, Merry Christmas to everyone. David W. Todd, Shalom from the Hoosier State, praying for the Shalom, Shalom of Jerusalem, amen, and all of Israel. The Hoosier State is which state, Wyatt?
Whose state?
Hoosier.
Whose
Hoosier.
state? Who's your state?
State.
Who's your state?
You don't know. Okay.
I think your state is Michigan.
Who's my state?
No. Who's your state?
You know what state I'm from? You know what state I was born in?
Indiana, yeah.
Yeah, you know what the Hoosier State is?
Michigan?
Or Indiana.
I mean, I guess so, but it's like a 2% chance you'd get it right for that, yes.
Lord have mercy. You know what Ashley Haas is asking? Do you know Ashley?
Oh, yeah.
How do you know her?
We talk a few times.
What?
Yeah.
How so? Oh, she wanted your autograph.
Don't remind me.
You're not texting each other, are you?
Yes.
Why? Wait a minute. Is there
I don't know.
something going on here that I'm not aware of? Why?
Yes, many things. Not just in this room, but in this world around us, but yes.
Anyways, Ashley jumped on and said, Lowe's lore. She loves your Lowe's lore.
Well, lucky for her, because I have some more.
Okay, well, let's finish up. Let's finish saying hi, and then we're going to do it. Louis Leone, Christmas with a capital C. Somebody else saw the movie. Let's see. David M. Todd, I'm not noticed. Well, you just were. Ashley Haas said, I noticed you because she's sweet. She's looking for people to notice. Danny Herring, hello, David. Let's see. Paula Faye Marie Rauchi says, you're the bit, Wyatt. Ched says hi. T.W. Smith got off of YouTube just in time to say greetings, Brad, and Doing Boy the mute. Michael Quackenbush, drink up the nose. Jeff Hayes, maybe they watch Mr. Bean. James Rampant, hello. Let's see. Ashley House. Brad almost did a spit take. Don't know what that meant. Aaron Oakes, I still don't have access to the extra content for the militia. It's not out yet. It's not your fault. It's coming. I sent an email, but I haven't received anything yet. Logically lacking here, I guess, but I'll remain bedridden with my bedpan and embrace the highlight of my week. Glad I can see this. Aaron, it hasn't come out yet. We're still trying to put all those tiny pieces together, but we have a stack of it, and you will be able to binge it soon, but thanks for asking. David Todd, Christ, the Greek translation, the Hebrew word for Messiah, plus the Spanish word for more. Christ, more Christmas. Let's see. Dick Chris says, Ashley Haas, timing is everything. Now everybody's all over Ashley's case because of her crazy, right? Let's see. Oh, Deanna Mira, same here for that extra content. Not sure if I'm looking for it right back. It's coming. It's not coming yet. It's not here yet. So the good news is you got a whole bunch of stuff coming. Bad news is it's not up yet because I still have techno crap because I'm broke. Why did they stop donating to us? You think we're going to survive? You know they only have 2 weeks left, and if they do it now, they can get a tax write-off, or they can help us build this into something grandiose, or they can pay it to Uncle Sam, who's going to give it to who knows what.
What? I didn't know that.
I know. Dusty Wilhelm, I agree 100%. Let's see. Jeff Hayes, Emerald Lagasse uses onomatopoeia. Bam! Yeah. Just looking if anybody I haven't said hi to, Wyatt. Sheldon Romero, this is deep. This is deep all the time. You better believe it. Let's see. Noah's Rainbow was stolen. Yeah, that was quacky. Karen Boyd, Merry Christmas. So she's still hearing us. Let's see. Jeff Hayes, the only tree that I know can walk and talk is Groot. Who's Groot, Wyatt?
He's a superhero from Marvel.
Okay.
He's a talking tree guy.
Okay.
I know for a fact you have no idea
Right.
what that is.
No, I don't.
Nope.
Okay. Hey, look at this. Karen Boyd said pagan rituals also consist of donning masks and standing 6 feet apart. But that didn't stop anyone from questioning that. Just saying, look at Karen taking the maskers down. Karen doesn't play around. Why? You know how many shows she's seen of me live?
A few.
3.
I mean, I'm not wrong.
A few is 3, right?
Yes, I'm going to say yes.
Hey, Jeff Hayes said Brad Stine sounds like Batman when he whispers. Carrie Tudor, Christmas capital C. Everybody's saying that. Michael Quackenbush, he goes, Ashley, with a whole bunch of exclamation points. Loin Boyd made contact, and now she's going, yes, Lowe's lore. So Ashley is absolutely determined. Oh, now she said, we've texted Wyatt.
Yeah?
What is going on?
I don't know. What are you talking about?
I'm just very, very confused about this, Ashley. I just brought her in to be helpful.
Confused about how to turn on Facebook. So you being confused doesn't really seem that big of a stretch.
Well, why we have a really talk about a stretch. Holy smoke! Have we got a unique guest on tonight? Well, tonight we have
stretch. Mm-hmm. Why would I do that?
Are you stretching?
Yeah, maybe. It's kind of hard to tell.
Stalling. I want to say
congratulations. You figured out what I was.
No, I knew what you were doing right away. It's
yeah.
just, that was a funny bit from the SpongeBob movie.
Yeah,
listen.
Somehow, one of the only movie quotes that you have is from
funny.
the SpongeBob
Because it was funny.
It is. It's pretty funny.
It's a funny bit. Yeah. So here's the deal. I got a really special guest. Now, I've already recorded some other guests, folks, for your viewing and listening pleasure. I hope you watch on Spotify. I hope you like and follow me on Facebook. I hope you subscribe on YouTube. Brad Stine Has Issues. I hope you follow me on Instagram and on Twitter, because I get throttled like crazy. And I'm also, have we got on Rumble yet, son?
Rumble, not yet, I don't believe.
But we can get on, we just haven't.
Yeah, we can.
So everything's up to date. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, right?
Spotify, yeah. Spotify.
Okay, so here's what I wanted to tell you folks. I have some great new energetic unique things coming for this podcast for 2024. I always love the new year because it feels like you're starting fresh, even though what difference does it make if it was 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks ago or 2 months from now. Whenever you start, you start. But nevertheless, if you want to donate to this ministry, there are 2 ways to do it. One is just to the general donation to try to keep the thing running, keep the lights on, keep the mortgage paid, do things that are necessary to allow this to exist regularly every Monday, whether you like it or not. But I have someone that I've gotten with that we're going to start making some sketches. So we're going to start adding that. I've been wanting to do that for a year or 2. I've been telling you we're going to do it. I got to pay for that. So I don't know what's going to happen as far as how we're going to go about doing that, but we're going to try and see if it's something that will take off on social. And if it does, it will all point us back to the podcast. I want to grow this podcast, and I've been talking to some other folks. I don't want to bring this up yet until if and when it happens. If it does, then I will let you in on some other people. But we are trying to find ways to grow the podcast that you guys created by your donations, by your watching, by your sharing. And you have to do that. You just do. And most of you, I know you do. You wouldn't be here every Monday night if you didn't share and watch and you care about what's going on. Pray for us. We need that too. But more importantly, just if you got ideas, if you things that you think can help grow us, if you got ways of getting this out in the atmosphere, let's do it. I think we're on to something. We certainly have had some wonderful guests, so I don't have to worry about that. I've had some amazing guests. Guests that have been on Rogan, the biggest podcast in the world, have been on my show. So it's not like we don't have some great guests. But And then White and I, we're fun, right? I mean, we're not the greatest, but we're not bad. I mean, we're not less funny than some other guys out there. So we're on to something. Adding more bells and whistles, I think, is part of what we need to do. It's funny because one of my first shows, my comedy shows that got me known, was Put a Helmet On. And that was done 23 years ago. And the idea of put a helmet on, that phrase that I coined 23 years ago that people know me for, suddenly has started showing up 23 years later in a couple people who are much more famous than me. Candace Owen did one. Why? By the fact, if I'm not mistaken, son, don't we have a clip of her using my phrase 23 years after I coined it?
Candace Owens?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Why don't you show them?
Okay, so yeah.
What do you have to say to the trans students on this campus who feel actively victimized by your presence here?
Life's tough. Get a helmet, man. I'm too pregnant for this.
Now, let's...
It's a short one, but yeah.
Yeah, life's tough. Get a helmet. Oh, and I believe there's a very newcomer in comedy who's gotten really big because he's young and he's doing the new type of comedy. And gee, you got any clip on him and something he just said that got him almost canceled all over the world? White, anything that we could show up that might have some reference to something your old man came up with 23 years ago?
I don't know, but I will play the clip that you have mandated I play at this point.
How long is it?
A few seconds.
Okay, go.
Naples News. Comedian Matt Rife sparks controversy with joke in Netflix special. Is he performing in Florida? Well, I chose this local news outlet for a reason, mostly because it just documents the controversy around comedian Matt Rife. He had a Netflix special where he appeared to mock domestic violence victims. How dare he? I really, really don't care that he did. And here's the best part. Here's from NBC News. Comedian Matt Rife responds to Netflix special backlash with a link to special needs helmets. He made...
All right, that's one way to do it.
So he made fun of domestic violence. I don't know. I didn't see it. Now, I'm going to say something. I don't know if it's controversial. I don't care. I'm going to say it anyways. I believe comedy should have no borders, no boundaries. None. None. Talk about anything, make fun of anything, mock anything, joke about anything. That's what I believe. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to like it. It doesn't mean I'm going to want to hear it. It doesn't mean I'm going to pay to listen. It doesn't mean that I think it's nice or good. I want free speech, period. Anytime you can limit speech, it's just a slippery slope to limiting all speech, or that somebody self-imposes themselves on the rest of us as the arbiter of what is okay speech. And this is why I never believed in the idea of hate speech. I don't believe in the term. I don't believe in the concept of hate speech. Speech is what it is. If somebody speaks and says, I hate you, or I hate this, or I hate those types of people, yeah, they said the word hate, and they said what they feel about these people. It should be allowed to exist. I'd rather know what you believe and what you hate than have you say all the right things, but in secret you're hating and trying to destroy people. I'd rather know the bigots when I see them. So I just wanted you guys to see that 23 years ago when I said put a helmet on. And it was, by the way, if you haven't seen the special, it was out. You can get it now. I think it's on YouTube, or it was out for free. But you can go get it at bradstine.com. You can rent it. You can buy it. You can get it. I was referencing bicycle helmets, and kids needed helmets when I didn't wear helmets, learning to ride my bike when I was growing up. But the point of the matter is this. Freedom comes with a cost. It comes with a price. And that is you're going to be offended. You're going to get your feelings hurt. You're going to get mocked. You're going to get ridiculed. Things that you hold dear is going to be blasphemed. It's going to be, ridiculed, critiqued. It's going to be maligned. Things that you care about is going to be spit upon, crapped on. That's what it means to be free. And you have to be a big enough man and woman to say, oh, well, at least we're free. What we learned in the cult of Corona, that many, many, many citizens in this country, and as you know, I don't call them Americans anymore, they relinquished that right, gave up their freedom and did and wore and injected exactly what they were told, as long as they were safe. That kind of myopic self-protection over the big picture of freedom, liberty, free speech, autonomy of my body to do as I choose with my body, not talking about life and death and pregnancy, by the way. The whole argument of I can do what I want with my own body when I'm pregnant is so absurd on the very nature of its concept, because we aren't talking about your body. We're talking about the body in your body. That's the one we're talking about. And if you believe your body is autonomous to be able to do as it please, then please give the same right to the baby you got inside of you to have its body left alone. You know, if you could ask it if it wants to be killed and butchered, and it said yes, well, maybe we could have that argument. But until then, let it get out of the womb. Somebody will love it, take care of it, and you go live your life as you choose. And then butchering babies is the way you see the world, so be it. I don't. I think it's evil. And so I'm going to say so. I want the freedom to be able to say so. I want the freedom to say I don't want to have to inject that in my body, especially if I don't know what it is and why it's there. And now that we've seen that all of the health organizations, whatnot, are all beholden to the pharmaceutical industry and political ends to make money, get power, and control the people, all bets are off, folks. We are living in a brave new world. And what we've discovered is it's not brave at all. It's cowardly. It's not new at all. It's old. It's Baal worship. And it's the world we now find ourselves. I want to take this on, man. I want this podcast to blow up. I want it to be big, huge. I want my people like Karen and Nick and Paula Faye Mariachi and Danny Herring and Angela Winkle, I see her there, and did I say Nick Crest, and Donna Mitchell, and I want Carrie Tudor, and I want Jim Bronaugh. I want all of you guys that have been here from the beginning to always be here. You'll always be remembered. If this turned into 10,000 people watching, I'll try to find you and say hi to you, because you got this started. But folks, here's where we are. Let's see if we can keep it going. Hey, do me a favor. Here's a Christmas gift. Sign somebody up for Militia of the Mind. It's $36. I need their email. Go to bradstein.com, email their name, put in the money. They're good to be part of the mighty 10,000. Karen Boyd, if you're out there, I don't know who you are, I need you to personally message me. I need the size of your shirt. We'll personally message it, send it to me so I know what size it is. We do now have access to the shirts. And I'm going to give a couple of those shirts to you and Nick, and the rest of the folks will have them too, but I'm going to do something special for you too. So I need your size. I already have Nick's. So this is where we're at, guys. If you believe in what we're doing and think there's something amazing that can continue, then you can donate now. Karen, I'm sure, will put the link up where you can go for it and participate and get a tax donation in the meantime. I am really excited about the fact that Christmas is coming. Next week, it's Christmas Day. Monday is Christmas Day, and Wyatt and I talked about it. And I said, Wyatt, I think we need to bite the bullet. We need to get on here. People need us. They want us. We need to have a fire burning. We need to have a cup of hot cocoa. Wyatt, I love these people. If it costs me my Christmas time in the evening with my family, I'm willing to sacrifice everything, son, because I want to give back to the people, even on Christmas Day. And of course, Wyatt said, no, I don't give a crap about them. So I guess we're not going to be here next Christmas, this Christmas at all. What is it, Wyatt? Okay.
That is my current opinion on this conversation.
Obviously, he didn't say that.
Yes, obviously.
So here's the thing. We did talk about it, and I was saying, what should we do? And then I thought, well, I'm guessing most of the people aren't going to be around on Christmas night. They're going to be with their families. I thought, should we just do a special? Should we do it on another date? And I said, why don't our Christmas, this Christmas be, everybody take the day to yourself. We won't be here. That way you don't have to worry about missing it or leaving a family gathering for us. And not saying you would, but some of you might have because you're such loyal fans. Stay with your family. put on Christmas music, have a cup of cocoa, put on a fire log. Next week we're just gonna go dark. We're gonna let Christmas illuminate your night for you and your day for you, and be that way. And then we'll come back New Year's Day to launch 2024 and really start moving into the next phase, the next season in Brad Stine Has Issues. And I think that will make the most sense. Got some great guests coming up. But as you know, I am an eclectic Renaissance man who have lived a life that's been quite charming and unique, and it has allowed me to be around very, very interesting people. And so this week before Christmas, I'm going to bring on a very special guest. Matter of fact, I'm going to show, before I even introduce him, show a picture of this special guest as he's lounging around resting. Wyatt, do you happen to have the lounge around photo that I mentioned to you? You said you could put up prior to bringing on the interview. You know what I'm talking about?
Lounge around?
Where he's laying down.
Oh, yes, of course.
So just to give you a little sneak preview of the guy we're about to see, here's a photo of him doing what he does for a living. There he is.
It's kind of hard to tell.
Well, that's because the guy with the sledgehammer just exploded a cinder block on this man as he was laying on sharp swords.
So, probably not the best night out, I'd have to say.
Not really. He definitely doesn't have a My Pillow. That's for sure.
He has whatever the opposite of a My Pillow is.
That's right.
All pillow.
Yes. If a pillow. I wish a pillow. But that's who he is. And this is somebody I met personally and worked with back in the 90s. And you're going to find why. You're going to find out a little bit more about me, Brad Stine, prior to my world as a comedian. Time of you know a little bit about it, but not all of it. So I'm going to reveal something to you as a Christmas gift, something about myself that happened to me and that I did one time, and the legend that it became. You're going to hear all of that in this interview. And you're going to hear a side of the underbelly, dark subculture in the world that you have heard about, perhaps. Maybe you've read about it. Maybe you saw it in science fiction movies or in Twilight Zone episodes or who knows what. A world of the carnival, a world of the sideshow. You've heard about it, but most of you will have no idea how it really worked, who these people actually are. Well, tonight you will learn what actually happens to those who actually live in that odd world. This man was participant in what was very popular back in the 90s, a traveling sideshow called, and I think you have a photo of them too, the troupe. Put them up if you would. They were called the Jim Rose Sideshow. Show them to the folks. They came out of Seattle, Washington, if I remember, and there he is with the fire in his mouth underneath all of the freaks. And yes, they're freaks, and I say that with all the gusto I can. Free speech, but more importantly, it was a part of carnival life for a long time, the freak show. So you're going to listen to this man who was unique, who has a very, very unique and difficult show to watch. We have some footage, right? We got that prepared, Wyatt?
Footage of what?
Of him doing some of his crazy stuff that I sent you.
Oh, you mean like the introduction thing?
The stuff where where he's doing some of his crazy.
So it's sort of like the interview of him.
Yeah, but it shows him doing some of his stuff.
It's in the interview.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure it was up.
Yeah. It's in.
You're going to see what this guy does, and it's going to be hard for some of you to watch, especially Ashley Haas, because she finds herself worshiping trees.
Viewer discretion is
advised.
Super advised.
Do not bring children with you, but this...
You know what? If you're squeamish, just wait for it to go on Spotify.
Yeah, trust me, folks. But this is my guess. This is the world I want to give you guys, an eclectic view of the world. I hope you learn something. I hope you grow from it. And folks, God bless you. Have a Merry Christmas. We won't be here next week. We're going to let you have that to yourself. We'll take it to ourselves. And then we'll start up guns roaring, starting the first year, Monday of the new year. So, folks, Enjoy this. Remember, Wyatt and I watch while the interviews happen. Sometimes we can jump in, say hi. If you're on YouTube, God bless you. Follow, like, share, notify, and have the greatest of Christmases. And enjoy this gift from God's Comic, Brad Stine, to you. An interview with the Torture King, Tim Cridland. Enjoy, guys. Well, folks, I'm really, really excited about this next guest for so many reasons. I promise you, and we've had some really interesting guests. I mean, I don't know when this is going to air, but just last night we had an astrophysicist on, certainly a unique guest. I've had senators, I've had musicians, I've had magicians, I've had comedians, obviously, everything that's part of the life and the world that I have lived. I've had people in that genre show up. But this particular guest is very unique, I promise. First off, I guarantee you've never met somebody that does the things this guy does. But what's more important to me is he represents a subculture, not only of the arts, but of a world I have been involved in my whole life that very few people would know. Because most people don't know that I've had family in the carnival since the 60s. They taught me Carney language. I went out on the road in the carnival. I mean, that weird culture that people find interesting is part of my DNA. So I've always had a soft spot for the carnival, for the Midway, but I've lived it. I haven't just read about it. But this particular guest I'm about to have on is somebody that, believe it or not, and we'll talk about that in a moment, I worked with in an amazing venue that we, again, will talk about when I bring him on, that none of you would know I've done this. Nobody would know because it's so odd. And in the best ways, because nobody has been more interesting to me in my life than the odd people, the quirky people, the idiosyncratic people. That, to me, is the artists. They're just people that have found their own drummer and then shot him and got a tuba player. That's the kind of folks that I like hanging out with. So this particular gentleman has a resume that is difficult to describe, so I'll let him do it. But he is known as the Torture King, if that should just prepare you for what we're about to discuss. But his real name, his human name, is Tim Cridland. Tim, how are you, my friend?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing
well,
good.
My friend. So, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate having you and spending some time with me. You are definitely going to fill a gap in my gallery of interesting guests that I've had on. But you and I, and honestly, Tim, I don't even know if you remember me. Do you remember?
Talking when we met, yes, of course.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure because it had been so many, many years ago. But you and I met, and I'm telling you for the sake of the audience watching.
Absolutely.
I met Tim at Knott's Berry Farm, probably 1998, 99.
Yeah, that sounds exactly right. Probably 98.
98, 99. Yeah. And I had been booked, believe it or not, to work Halloween Haunt is what they call it. And every year, I don't know if they're still doing it. I guess they are. Do you still do Halloween Haunt?
They still do it. I haven't done it in a little while. Strangely, I did work Knott's Berry Farm Halloween events during 2020.
Okay.
Which is very odd somehow.
Yeah.
They made it work.
Yeah.
But that was the last time I worked there after not working there for a while. They've always got people who come in now and decide they're going to change things up. So you never know. I'm going to work.
And Chuck Burns
Chuck Burns is deceased. He is, unfortunately, yes, a really great guy. He was a former clown on Ringling and then went on and worked at Disneyland and worked at Knott's as the entertainment director. And he booked me for 17 years in a row. And I thought they booked me once. I thought I was going to be, that was it. But I became a regular feature of Knott's Berry Farm. Which is why I'm saying, it's things changed, but eventually, it got bought by a corporate. It used to be just a independently owned, family-owned business, and it got bought by Cedar Fair, right? And that changed a bit, and then other things changed, and eventually I've done other kind of Halloween events. I've worked at some Six Flags parks in upstate New York, but unfortunately not at Knott's in the last couple of years. But I'd love to go back there. It's a great place. It's a great venue, and when we had it, it was actually a smaller area. We had these little stages. We had small little stages. You had one down the road. I had one, and there was one between us, I remember. And the thing was, you were swallowing swords at the time, I recall, which is pretty rare at the time as well. There was a point when I was swallowing swords that I would say I'm one of 5 performing regularly sword swallowers in North America, and it was true. And so you could count literally on 2 hands who was swallowing swords. At least it was like 5 to 7 people who were doing it at the time. So that was very unique that you were swallowing swords back then.
Yeah, very much so. And, like I said, my audience knows me for the most part as a comic. I've been a professional comedian since 1988 is when I started going, kind of began my career as a comedian. But at that time, I had started as a magician. So that was how I started out in the business.
One thing I remember you telling me was that you did, at one point, were doing a comedy act where you took kind of the sideshow stuff into these comedy venues and tried to put them together, but you told me they just didn't get it at the time, at least. How long ago was that when you were doing it?
So what happened for me was that I was a close-up magician, and for those who don't know the difference, you'd probably know it it's now, they kind of call it street magic. I mean, I think David Blaine kind of reframed it. It's basically just magic, sleight of hand done in a close proximity to the audience. We just call it table hopping. I worked in restaurants, walking to table, performing sleight of hand with cards and coins and sponge balls and things along that line, and made my living doing that in Southern California. And I was always interested in the sideshow, and the reason I was interested in the sideshow was, as I said in our intro, is my family were carnies since the 60s. So I kind of watched my uncle's the one that kind of got involved with it. As a matter of fact, he's the guy that invented the basketball, where you shoot the basketball into the hoop and to win prizes. That was his concept. But anyways, so they've been doing it since the 60s and are still involved in on the road as running the joints throughout the country. So I spent a summer with him working at the carnival. It's kind of like the initiation as a Stine. You got to go do the carnival for a summer and just see what that was like. But they had sideshows. And I was just fascinated by these people, because it's like, how do you even come across this type of phenomenon, this type of odd, unique, really, I don't even know if there's an equivalent where one can say, well, this is like, it's one thing to do music, and we do orchestral music, but that turned into jazz, which turned into blues, which turned into rock. At least there's some sense of coordinating musical tones into different styles of music. It makes sense. Or to act on stage, and then that goes into movies, and that goes into short films or whatever. But at least you're kind of you understand the germination of this. Sideshow phenomenon is just, it's like, where did this come from? Matter of fact, why don't we start there? We'll go all about me here in a little bit, but this is your expertise. So I'll bet you, and I remember when we would talk, you were quite an avid reader and a study of the history of some of this phenomenon that you were doing, because, dude, you take it to some crazy levels. When I did the sideshows, there was a guy called the human pincushion. and there was a guy that would do the blockhead where they would pound the nails into the nose. I know you know that. You probably do it. The human pincushion, he would take needles and I just remember one thing, he'd pull his sock up and put the needle through his sock and hold his sock up with a needle through the flesh. Probably did it through the arm, if I recall. It's been a long, long time. So I thought, well, I've seen this. And then I saw you. And I'm going, what? You took it to some crazy levels. So let's start out with you defining yourself. So what do you call, I know your moniker, the Torture King, but what do you call what you do for a living?
Well, yeah, the Torture King as a name was a traditional sideshow name for somebody who does acts that would seem to cause pain or injury, and they survive it with minimal pain, minimal injury. They do it right. That's the thing. I want to say that I do some dangerous things that would cause injury, but I do this night after night, sometimes in multiple. If you know at Knott's Berry Farm, I did it like 5 times a night of some pretty extreme penetrations of flesh with sharp objects. So I know the anatomy, I know what I'm doing, and I've studied the kind of old ways of doing it. I'm doing a pain control act. What I'm showing, I say it's like, people, it's sometimes we call it a pain-proof man. I was actually on Stanley's Superhumans as a superhuman power of the man who feels no pain. And so that's what I'm presenting it as overcoming pain, overcoming injury. The kind of based, I'll tell you how this all began. There's a lot of these based on feats that were done in kind of religious rituals in other countries, other cultures, a lot of them in Middle Eastern cultures, where you have somebody who is called a fakir, which is Arabic actually, and it means somebody who has nothing, which is not a literal, so oftentimes that is literally true, somebody who has an oath of poverty, but it means that you don't own yourself. You're on loan. Your whole body is on loan. It's temporary, and it's overcoming the kind of material discomforts. You're showing that the material discomforts are when you put yourself in a state of mind that this is not very important. You can lift yourself out of the physical world, so to speak. Yeah. So it's kind of based on that. There were, people went to different countries and saw people do these different rituals, and it's kind of universal. A lot of these are in many different cultures. You'll see them. And a lot of this happened with the travelers, like 1890s, things like that, would come back and do books describing this. And then there were world's fairs where they would bring people who will actually come and do these rituals in a world's fair, and it was very fascinating, especially to people in Europe. And there was a point between World War I and World War II, especially in Europe, where people would start doing this as entertainment. Usually this would be in theaters, these fakir acts, and fakir spelled Fakir. It's often mistaken for a couple of other words, which doesn't have much to do with, but in Europe they still know the word fakir and what that means. And the very extreme, they also had Westerners who were then kind of emulating, doing imitations of these acts. So people would pretend to be from Egypt or pretend to be from whatever Middle Eastern country, but they were just maybe they were German or something like that. And especially in Germany, a lot between the wars, it was very popular in places like Berlin. And very extreme things could happen. There's a bed of nails, was like the popular demonstration, but live burial is something that people would do, where they'd get buried alive without oxygen. And there's a very famous thing where Houdini got in a feud with one person who was doing a live burial act, and then he was trying to outdo this person. And I could go into the controversy about that. I don't think it was actually Houdini comes out as the victor of this, but
was that where he was buried? Where he was
under in a swimming pool? In a swimming pool, yes. But I think they were doing two different things, because when Houdini came out of the, it was an endurance feat, but he had a very high level of blood pressure and temperature, and a lot of sweat. So his body heat was way up, while the other person was seemingly lower blood pressure, lower heart rate, and cool to the touch when they came out. So they were doing two different things, but it kind of became, this publicity, the press releases, the publicity. It was more important than that, what was actually going on. So I think some things were lost with that. But what I started doing, there was this very kind of, when it came to like circus sideshows, P.T. Barnum, they put these in a fixed location, a dime museum, you'd call them. P.T. Barnum had a very famous, museum that you go in and you'd see all kinds of things, but you'd also see the physical feats done by various different performers, a lot of them very extreme acts like this. And then it became a part of circuses as the sideshow. The literal sideshow was the show you'd see beside the big tent. You'd see it before the circus would begin. And at that point, the circus was an all-day event where people would go and watch them set up the tent, and then they'd be just around the grounds for a long time, for hours and hours. So they'd have these other shows set up, and the sideshow would have things. It would have magicians and things like that, but also some of the extreme acts, like what I do, the Torture King acts, and considered quite mainstream entertainment at the time, considering how extreme they were. And then of course they end up getting with the carnival, where they just have all the sideshow acts are just in separate tents and various different type of entertainment acts. And usually these would go to small towns where they wouldn't have a lot of local entertainment necessarily. So this was more of a big deal. And it was actually the live shows at a carnival, or at one point the main attraction of the rides were there as well. And nowadays it's kind of flipped, and everybody's, it's all about the rides. And it's very rare that you'll see a live show, because it's not very cost effective for the people who do them, with the rates they pay for the setup there, as well as we've got all the competition from all the other and travel as well. I think there was a time people weren't able to travel as far as they could now, so they couldn't just drive into town. But it became kind of a dying thing in the 1950s, was kind of dying off, and into the 70s there were very few left. And I was fascinated by it. I just read about these things, about the kind of maybe romanticized versions of these sideshows. And I was fascinated when I was very young. I read a book. It was actually a magic book in my elementary school library. It was by Walter Gibson, called Secrets of Magic, Ancient and Modern. And it had all the stage illusions and things, but it had this whole section on the old physical feats, the kind of torture acts, the sword swallowing, and the fakir act as well. And for some reason, I found that all fascinating. Maybe because when I was a kid, I was kind of morbid. Maybe I was into monster movies and things like that, and I was into very visceral things, and fascinated by it. But for whatever reason, I just kept that interest. Read about it, as I said, kind of romanticized versions. There were some books by an author named Dan Mannix about traveling with the carnival. And a group of people in Seattle in the early 90s kind of had it would turn up these similar interests. And a lot of people coming from first an interest in magic and things like that, but always having that fascination. And we put together this show in 1991. It was called Jim Rose Circus Sideshow, and it became very big very quickly. It was like the acts were so old that they were new again, that people would come up to us and say, how did you guys think of all this stuff? How did you come up with this? And, for me, I was just replicating these old acts that I'd only read about, and that was kind of the danger as well, because you'd read about these acts and how to do them, and a lot of times the information was wrong. It was just people making things up. So the acts are dangerous, and he kind of had this learning process to it. The show Jim Rose Circus sideshow, toured worldwide, and it kind of changed everything because we made a new venue for it. We were playing at places where normally rock bands would perform at, and we toured this rock festival circuit, and we got on Lollapalooza, the second Lollapalooza, which really was the biggest one ever, and got in Newsweek magazine and Spin magazine and all kinds of press all over, People magazine and a lot of TV press. And so we toured all over the world with that. I became, for various reasons, disenchanted with the show, left it in '94, started doing my own touring show. And then, about '96 is when I got on Knott's Berry Farm, doing a version of my act. And I was basing my act, it seems, on the 1920s type of European presentation of the old fakir act of, though the show I was in before was kind of like over the top, shocking, dropping trying to yelling and dropping the F-bomb, might I say. I was kind of doing a more of a serious presentation, which maybe came off, perhaps semi-purposely, as kind of I would say like a Mondo movie type of, I don't know how to describe it, in search of type of, Leonard Nimoy doing the strange, the bizarre, the unusual, which is kind of humorous at its time because it's kind of straight-faced, and people kind of accuse me of doing a humorous Leslie Nielsen type of deadpan type of humor, of which I was like, no, I'm trying to be serious, but whenever I try to be serious, people think it's funny, and when I try to be funny, people think it's serious. It happens to me a lot. But whatever the case, this was kind of a type of entertainment that had, especially when I began, because when I left the show, I was doing a very, compared to what I do now, less intense version. I was doing the human pincushion act, where I was taking needles, putting it in the skin of my forearm, through my cheeks and things like that. I studied the kind of more the ancient techniques of where it all came from, Middle Eastern type of mysticism and religious demonstrations, which were much, much more extreme because they weren't being done, every day for, multiple times a day, which would happen in a sideshow where somebody would be performing an act that would, they'd do it 10, 20 times a day in a real carnival sideshow. So you're getting like a very low level version of this because somebody would have to stretch out their intensity of the performance, I suppose. But I was doing like one big show a night. So I was putting most of it all into that. And I was doing some very deep penetrations where I take a skewer, like a sharpened bicycle spoke, and put it under my tongue, in my mouth, and it would come out under my chin. Going through the bicep, right through the very middle of the muscle, and the muscle of the forearm. And I based this on some old accounts, but also some contemporary accounts of people doing this in Middle Eastern countries. And there are people even doing it way more intense stuff. There's somebody who in the 40s would run a sword, like a fencing foil, but sharpened, and it would go right beside their spine and their back and come out right in the solar plexus area, and it was legitimately 100% real. They began to do this in hospitals because they were banned to perform it in.
Didn't you tell me? Because I've seen a picture of this guy that it went through his liver. It went through his liver.
Yeah, so it would actually go through his liver, and he did it in the Swiss hospital where they X-rayed him, and he went side to side as well. And this is the type of thing. It's like I was totally fascinated by that, and this is like what I was going towards. I ended up being on TV shows like. What was really lucky, you might remember this. There's a time where in Europe they had some TV shows where you could do kind of some weird, unusual specialty acts, but it was not so much in the U.S. Then I think this was might have been '98, when Guinness World Records, the TV show, came back on the air. And they wanted specifically this type of thing. At first they did. So there was a point where it was like, we went from, as I said, kind of like a forgotten art form, and then we took it to the rock and roll kind of venues where it was kind of counterculture thing. And then when Ripley's came back on the air, Guinness World Records came back on the air, and they were looking for this type of thing, and then it kind of made it mainstream, that we took it completely, which I always said, this is one of the reasons I took out the the presentation. The guy I worked with before was just dropping the F-bomb all over the place, screaming and yelling. And I'm like, no, I would say there's no crudity, there's no nudity. There's nothing lewd or crude in my act. I'm not saying any swear words. Just maybe, it's maybe too intense for some viewers, they always say. But I was able to get my act on mainstream TV by leaving out this whole counterculture, just trying to shock people with my language. And just, what I'm doing is shocking enough. And you counterbalance it with some serious presentation. That was my thing. I gave a serious presentation, and the extremeness comes through. You kind of need to mellow it out a bit with the presentation.
Well, let's I'm going to elaborate on that bit, but folks, he can explain this to you all you want, but there's nothing like seeing it live. So I'm going to tell you what, we're going to show a quick clip of some of the things that Tim does. Now, I will warn you, I've never had to do this before. It's real, and it is it's intense because it's so graphic in what he does that for some people they're not comfortable looking at it, because it looks incredibly painful, it looks incredibly dangerous, because it's all of those things. And he simply has learned how to utilize that in a way that he can control the pain, or at least endure it, or perhaps get used to it. We'll ask him about that. But a picture's worth 1,000 words, folks. So we're going to take a second and just show you. Hold on to your seats. I hope you're not eating, but enjoy a moment of Zamora the Torture King, and you can see exactly what we're talking about. Here we go.
My name is Tim Cridland. My stage name is Zamora the Torture King. The Torture King is a traditional name given to a performer who would do feats that would appear to cause pain or injury. The whole point is that I can overcome the pain, overcome the injury, and do it with minimal discomfort. And so it's all about immunity to pain and resisting injury. I kind of have the secret identity as it is already. I'm on stage, I'm Zamora the Torture King, but off stage it's kind of, I do things like I'm a writer. I wrote a book, Weird Las Vegas. I've lived in Las Vegas for a while as part of the Weird US series, and I've written a few things. When I was first putting needles into my body, it was not the deep muscle as I do now, but just skin, and it was more tendency to bleed and more tendency for the body to swell up. But my body seems to have adapted to that very quickly. But one thing I did, I was interested in this when I was very young, and I read a book which had descriptions of strange and bizarre acts all over the world, including putting the pins through the body. I had done this, I was in junior high, and they had a home economics class, and I said, well, here's some pins from the sewing class, and I thought I'd show my classmates a few stunts, and I pulled the flesh on my skin on my forearm up, and I put a few of the sewing needles through, and some of the people in the class were amused, some were appalled, but the teacher was most appalled, and I learned quickly that this is something you shouldn't do in school. In the 1950s, the sideshows kind of died out. In the 1970s, when I was growing up, there were a couple of them in existence still, but nowhere near where I was around, so everybody just kept pursuing it. And it was very appealing because of its kind of, I would say, visceral shock appeal. It's At the same time, I was kind of getting into punk rock, which also had this kind of like, rawness to it, and it kind of had that part of it. It was like this kind of shocking entertainment, the same aspect to it. One thing that's unique about me is that as I said, when I was growing up, there was very little of this going on, and I was part of a group of people that basically took the sideshow type act that used to be on the fairgrounds and the carnivals, but we took it to the rock and roll venues. It was just the happenstance. We're all kind of like counterculture people, and it was just a circumstance that caused this to happen. And we performed in a nightclub in Seattle, performing once every 2 weeks, and then we got picked up on the Lollapalooza tour in 1992. And for a lot of people, this type of entertainment was completely unknown, and it was a real shock, and we basically changed the way that people looked at the acts of sideshow. There was no longer the kind of fairground act, but it became kind of a counterculture, cool type of thing. So that was a part of something that I was a part of.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was my number man. I am Zamora the Torture King. Thank you. Zamora the Torture King.
I warned you. I begged you people, are you sure you want to go down this rabbit hole? But, Tim, like I said, I grew up going to sideshows. I grew up also interested in this phenomenon. I don't know why. I don't know what makes some people interested in this stuff. But it seems to me that when you and I would talk at Knott's, I got the sense that you certainly honored or at least respected the original intent of this, which I believe had a sense of a spiritual dimension, that you were overcoming your physical mind and its pains, your body, and having more of a transcendent experience, that there's a spiritual dimension. And that seemed to be very important to you. Now, I don't know if that was so much you just wanted to respect the tradition of it, or if that is actually part of your personal journey. I don't know. But I know that you didn't want to make it a spectacle. You didn't want to make it a novelty. You wanted it to be respected.
I didn't want to disrespect it. My whole thing was like, there's the serious part of it. The main part of it is you want to entertain people. It's an entertainment act. But I always wanted to put, in the background. If you're really looking, you can see that it's a real serious thing that I believe needs to be respected. And if somebody wanted to ask me questions afterwards, I was open for that. But it was not what I was leading with some, teaching experience here. It was entertainment. It is entertainment. That's what it as it kind of evolved into in the Western world, at least. Yeah. I did become very serious about this and research where it all came from. And a lot of it came from the fakir would be an aspect of certain, what's called
Would that be Hindus?
No, it is actually an Islamic mysticism. There's all these
like Zoroaster.
That's pre, that's a different thing entirely. Zoroastrianism, but it's Sufism, which is, I want to state that Sufism is in some of the fundamentalist countries is considered a heresy because it's it's a person. A lot of the religions, they've got a kind of a mystical aspect. I would say for the Jewish religion, you have the Kabbalah, Christianity, you've got the Gnostic, and then Islam has got the Sufism. And all of this is more of a personal connection as opposed to having to go through, and a lot of it has the same type of rituals of rhythmic breathing but it's making a personal connection with, I don't want to say of course, the divine with God, with getting rid of yourself, becoming part of the bigger picture, so to speak, putting yourself
Now, do
aside.
you feel that that is, so here's the tricky thing, because I want to be respectful I don't know your personal religious or maybe non-religious perspective, so I'm not here to comment on that. I don't know it. I don't mean it's interesting, whatever it is. But so here's the tricky thing. Sometimes in the course of trying to create an act or create a demonstration, whatever it is, liberties are taken, right? Artistic liberties are taken. So a dramatic act about laying on a bed of nails or certain things might be given this sort of drama in this big buildup, and it's part of what makes it interesting. You're giving them a show, but as you and I know, but coming from our background, that sometimes some of these things are simply a technique anyone could learn that doesn't need any mystical dimension to it, but that's part of what makes it, the entertainment of it. So do you feel like from your studies that those who started this technique, and I read a book years ago, I'll bet you've read this, it was called The Death and Resurrection Show.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a very hard to find book these days.
It is. I got that John
$100.
Cannon Aladdin books, but I got it. It was only printed in the UK. But it was the first book I had ever seen that was trying to describe how we came up with entertainment in general. When we watch somebody come sing, we watch somebody do a magic, we watch a juggler, we watch a theater play. We just take it for granted. But what this guy said was, well, where did this come from? And his premise was, it all came from religious witch doctors or the medicine men or those in the tribe who were given the mystical experience. They all had a unique birth. They all had sort of this prophetic element upon them that people knew of the tribe. This guy's a special one. He will be given to the medicine man, the witch doctor, and they will turn him into the next spiritual leader of the group. And so in order to pass on the traditions of the tribe, the history of the tribe, they would tell stories. And oftentimes it was done in a tent or in a special sacred room. Probably there would be some sweat lodge, there'd be some kind of heat going, some fires going, perhaps incense, probably some hallucinogenic mushrooms or cannabis or whatever they had at the time that they used to help emphasize this sort of whatever hallucinogenic element of the human mind. And in that, they would tell the story, and they would sing a song, or they would do a magic trick, right, to help emphasize visually a mystical or spiritual or a monumental part of this history of this tribe. And that's what ended up becoming put out into the mainstream, which is what you indicated earlier. You were taking these things that you find fascinating, and you found a way to kind of mainstream them, if we can use that word, taking them out of the sacred tent and sort of putting them on the stage. But I'd never really considered what happens on a stage. You are raised up above the audience, so you're already higher. You already have to be looked upon at a higher level. Special lights are placed upon you, so you're illuminated as opposed to the darkening of the house lights. You are given usually a microphone, so you have a deeper resonance of voice, so your power of your vocals is overwhelming. You are given the attention, so it's almost like there's this sense of a godlike status given to the performer, and the people accept that, and they get this sort of visceral experience from observing you that they bring into their life and utilize it. So I'd never heard it broken down like that, and I thought that's really interesting and probably makes sense. So that's kind of a long backdrop to my question to you, is that, do you think that the original fakirs or medicine men or whomever was using some of these techniques, and apparently all of them basically came from spiritual dimension categories, I guess. Do you think that they were actually used as a means to sort of prove their worth to the people, to keep their power? Or do you think there was, in fact, some kind of spiritual element taking place? I mean, overcoming your mind's pain, I guess, is real, right? But do you think it was overstated, or do you think there was something deeper to this that we have forgotten in the modern ages?
Well, part of this, the thing I've been following the Fakir Act, coming back, we call, if you want to research this, where it came from, you've heard of a whirling dervish, right? If you look up howling dervishes, this is the old word for it. It's a particular type because they're doing a particular breathing technique, which sounds like they're howling, or sawing wood is another word for it. And these acts would happen. And this was a private event. It wasn't something, and a lot of people like in the ritual would get involved. And it wasn't really for so much as, I realize, what you're saying here, but it wasn't so much public demonstration. You're part of a group, and a lot of the group would do this. If you wanted to, you could be part of it, and you could do these kind of extreme feats. There's also the accusation where you're trying to prove you're supernatural. I don't think this is what's going on. I've heard this, I'll say, I've heard people get upset about the power team. You're familiar with the power team? Christian strongman group. I saw them actually when I was 19. It's actually one of the influences on me. They did this strongman show, and then at the end, though it changed over the years, at the end it became basically standard strongman stunts, many of which you might see in the carnival. And at the end, they will get people to convert to Christianity. It's a kind of a draw to get them in. And then I had people like, well, that they're trying to prove that Jesus is giving them the power to break chains and things. Right. And I was like, no, this is an allegory. They're just saying, and this is a way to get people in, and there's a spiritual element to it, but it's a spectacle as well. And this is not so much with the Sufism dervish things. It was like you're part of the group and you're doing this. I'd compare it more to snake handling churches and I've read books on snake handling, and you hear the public version of it, but the people have gone in and lived with them. They're doing things. It's like, this is nuts. They're not doing this as a public performance. They're doing, there were accounts in some of these books where they would actually, the guy would be with them, somebody would take a lye drain cleaner and then put it with water, just put some lye in water and just drink it down and walk, and not as really a public thing. They just do this in the middle of the ritual, and the person who was like a college professor, knew it was the real deal. And it's like, there are these accounts of people doing these things that are seemingly miraculous, but they're not so much a public performance. It's kind of a group thing, that they're all together, changing the whole group thing. And then when the Westerners would come in, this is what kind of changed in the performance. There was like the Westerners would travel and observe these rituals in the Middle Eastern countries, and they'd be like, oh, what's going on here? And then this would turn it, kind of the observer changing the whole context of things. The observer changes what we perceive it to be. And that's what they brought it into the world's fairs as, a legitimate ritual. And then it became, for the Westerners, this is a thing to look at. And then, of course, more people begin to do it, and it gets on the stage. The thing you're talking about, the aspects of religious presentation on stage, it's kind of more shamanic, shaman type things. There's a thing about, well, these shaman witch doctors are doing a mixture of real things and some trickery as well.
Yeah.
And this is apparently to bring you to some bigger truth. There'll be like accusations, oh, this is a fraud, but there is like some aspects of some trickery. But yeah, it's a performance to bring you to some real thing. As to I'll say the thing you said, well, you can do some of these things. I can do better nails. You don't need, so there's physics in all of these things. I say, there's physics that'll do you to a degree, but it certainly helps if you can get out of your mind to do this. There was a scientist I talked with, learning some of this, who was doing some things with fire walking and actually would build up to hot metal. And one of the things I do is I do some stunts with hot metal where I lick a red hot poker and I've actually walked across hot metal plates that are heated up red hot. And I did this on 2 TV shows. I did it on Ripley's Believe It or Not many years ago, and then Venice Beach Freak Show, which some of these things are supposed to be, impossible. The walking on the red hot metal. But the guy I kind of learned this from, he was like just a normal scientist. He wanted to study fire walking to figure out what's going on, and he began to do it. But then he found himself kind of turning to this kind of the alter. It's like you don't really need. I'd say if you're doing fire walking, you might not start off with an altered state of consciousness, but you will. You'll get there. If you do it, you're just going to find yourself losing yourself. The scientist, whose name was Maine Coe, he went in for purely academic reasons, and he'd find himself kind of lost in the ritual of it all. And he began doing some very weird things, where he began experimenting as well with kind of Tibetan yoga, which raises your body heat. And this coming from him going for the pure academic aspect of it, and trying to figure out what's going on. He kind of got into the kind of, I wouldn't know if it's spiritual necessarily, but into the altered state of consciousness of the whole thing. So even if you're doing it as a spectacle, I think, I know there are people who do this and they're very anti-mysticism or whatever you want to call it, but it's going to end up going there if you go far enough. This thing, I think.
Well, here's where I think there's some. I think there is some correlation. Now, of course, I am a Christ follower, so I have a particular worldview. But I think part of what goes with that is I do believe there's a spiritual realm as well as a physical realm. I believe in that, and I believe that we're spiritual and physical bodies combined. So when a spiritual element is being explored or experimented with or whatever, it does affect your biology. I mean, the truth is there are endorphins that are released almost like a natural heroin that your body releases during certain pain or fire walking or fear, whatnot. So there is a correlation, I think, between the spiritual and the physical that is not only designed, but is something that you can observe in a scientific phenomenon. You mentioned like the power team, for example, and I got to be honest, as a Christian, that kind of bugs me, because I feel like I don't mind if you guys listen. I love sideshow stuff. I don't mind if you guys want to do your power moves and your strongman stunts, and if you're entertaining people to make a story, an allegory, a parable. Jesus did that. Good for you. But I don't like when there does seem to be this sense of using these techniques as though there was some miraculous thing. I feel like it's a little disingenuous, and that bothers me. And here's the problem, Tim. Here's the problem. For those of us who grew up in this world like you and I, who've studied this crazy subculture, or at least unique, maybe crazy isn't the word, but certainly odd and unique, and not that most people are aware of. It's an esoteric knowledge, let's put it like that. I find myself struggling sometimes to differentiate between a spiritual moment that does have some significance and a counterfeit or a fraudulent version of it, because I know how you can fake stopping your pulse. I know how you can fake your blood pressure or the heat in your body by holding a small piece of soap under your tongue was an old technique. that can change your heat. I know of the techniques of a lot of the illusions that create the sense of a counterfeit of a miraculous or spiritual dimension. So sometimes it's hard to go, do I believe anything? Do I believe anything is miraculous or supernatural, right? And so how do you navigate a spiritual realm that you do believe apparently is legitimate, with the knowledge of how many of these things can be taught or learned in a natural way?
Well, I think you're kind of saying, well, this is the thing that happened with well, so-called paranormal stuff, and there's like things people claims there's a way to fake things.
Yeah.
You can make something false doesn't mean that everything is false. You know, you can do I would say like because there's a movie, The Titanic, it looks like the Titanic sinking, doesn't mean the Titanic didn't actually sink.
Yeah.
You know, there's ways to fake things. There's ways to make counterfeit versions of things. And I'm even saying well, what you came in there, you said, you know, your mixture of physical and spiritual consciousness, all these things mixed together. This is what I agree completely is when I'm doing these a lot, you're taking yourself further away from your physical self into your spiritual self or into your consciousness. And that's what a commonality of a lot of this is. As far as faking it, I know people are doing this. I know there's some prominent magicians who have done some sideshow-esque type stuff that were, completely, I don't know how complete I can tell you without saying too much, but just not what they seem to be at all.
Like a David Blaine doing
I'm not going to mention names, but David Blaine actually does a lot of legit stuff, but he's I just think he somehow he gets a little too dangerous, I think, because he doesn't have he's injured himself a few times doing some of these things that required hospitalization. I think he cut his stomach with broken glass and things like this. Which I can't afford this, man. I say this thing, it's like I don't have a lot of money, I don't have a lot of insurance. I do dangerous things, but I don't want to get hurt. So I say if you're going to do something dangerous, you got to be very careful. You got to be very focused. You got to be very aware. You got to know exactly what you're doing. There's some other magicians who've done kind of bed of nails things that may not be legit. So there's things like this, you know, and people will think that's real, absolutely real for some of these. And well, I'll say somebody said, like, I saw my show at Knott's Berry Farm and said, hey, you know, you're pretty good, but you'll never compare to such and such magician from TV. And I say, well, the difference between me and him is I can do this live in front of you. I can do this live. I don't need to
Well,
see
this is what people wouldn't know. The layman watching us right now wouldn't understand. And it does give me a little bit of an insight that most people wouldn't have because of my magic background. That was my profession, and I have a deep study of that history as well as the sideshow and so forth, and can do some of those things, which makes it even rarer. But what was interesting is that there was a famous magician who passed away sadly, but had a wonderful show. His name was Harry Anderson, and
Yes.
he was a great.
Yes, I know exactly where you're going to go with this. Yes.
Okay, so Harry, one of his tricks that he made famous was the needle through arm, and he'd say, "Let's talk geek," and he really was interesting because he brought people into the idea of the geek or the sideshow, Monster Midway stuff. James, what was his name? Lindsey Graham,
Yeah.
And as well as Nightmare Alley.
Yeah,
And,
Nightmare Alley.
And so, so he would talk about these things, and of course that intrigued me because I loved that world. And he would take a needle, and I'm saying this for their benefit, not yours, and he would shove it through the side of his. Let me get this in the camera. Through his side of his arm, and he would push a big, giant needle through it, and then blood would come out eventually, and then he would pull it out, and it would mystically repair itself. No blood, no injury, no pain. The end. And it mind boggled people, and women would faint and whatever. Well, here's the thing. I know that technique. I used a similar technique. Matter of fact, in the show you saw me do in knots, I used a coat hanger and cut off the end and ran it through my neck. I was always looking for another version to at least be my own thumbprint if I'm going to use a technique. But it's a fake. It's a fake prosthetic means to give the illusion that you're pushing a needle through a skin. You know how it works. I know how it works. And then I'm watching you, and this is what was so fascinating. So what you guys need to understand is this. I'm going to say something I've never said actually live, and not that it matters. It just never came up. But when I worked at Knott's Berry Farm with Tim in 98, a guy by the name of Chuck Burns, who we mentioned earlier, who's passed away, a wonderful man, brought me in, and he knew that I did some of these techniques, these sideshow techniques, because I auditioned for him years before that, trying to get into Knott's. So they had Halloween Haunt, and they had this sort of midway area of only sideshow stuff. So Tim was there doing Torture King. There was another guy, forgot his name. I think he did, I don't remember, but he did Swords and Fire.
Fire thing, yes.
Okay, and then myself, and but I made a show out of it. I made this crazy character, and the name of the character I came up with was Sato the Masochist. And Chuck even did the voiceover for it, and the King of Shock. It was great. It was so cool. And I made this complete funny character out of it. And I don't know if you know this, Tim, but I'll tell you. For whatever reason, I guess because I came from a comedy background and an entertainment background, whatever character I'd created this guy, I just found an entertaining way to sell these tricks, okay? Well, but I would joke with the audience. I'd screw around with the audience. It was kind of like this real famous stuff that's happening right now on the internet, crowd rap, which is all comedians do. They talk to the guy in the stage. What do you do for a living? And they joke. And that's become real popular. Well, I was doing that with some of the crowd, and I just made a big show of it. Well, the people that worked at Knott's, that were dressed up as the ghouls and the goblins and did all the crazy stuff, would stop it during their off time and watch my show. They just thought it was funny because I had these funny lines and I literally created this guy just for this. He said, "You want to come work here?" And I go, "Man, I got to figure this out." So I created a costume with this crazy hat I had, and I took a blanket from American Airlines, and I cut a hole in it, and I put it over me, and I sewed up with big yellow and I just made this character almost like a medieval jester kind of guy, because I didn't know what I was doing, man. I just was trying to make this work because he's hiring me, and I don't, and this is a completely different character. Called him Sato the Masochist. Nobody knew who I was. So I finished the run, didn't know anything about it, and Chuck asked me the next year, "Hey, can Sato come back?" I said, "I'm working, man. I'm a comic. So I couldn't come back. Well, I came to find out years later, I was kind of I don't want to sound, I don't know how to, I was kind of like a legend to these people. It's like, whatever happened to that guy? He was just crazy and funny and weird, and where did he go? So I vanished. So I became mysterious. Like, whatever happened to Sato the Masochist? And I didn't know any of this was happening, but every year Chuck would try to get me to come back. I couldn't do it. And I just kind of became this mystical ninja guy that showed up and disappeared, and they never found him again. And I say this because years later, some guy, I don't know if it was through Facebook or whatever, somehow connected to me. I don't even remember the full scope of this. But he said, "Did you do a show in Knott's years ago?" And say to them, and I go, like, so it was years later, and I go, "Who is this?" "Yeah, I did." "Okay, what's going on?" "We've been looking for you for years. Everybody talked about what happened to that guy." So he came and saw me perform my comedy at a church I was working. We got to meet him. We've kind of stayed in touch, but he told all of his friends, I found Sato. Like I was I was like Bigfoot. They were looking for this guy. So I never knew any of that was happening. But anyways, so nobody knew that I was Sato the masochist because I only did it one time in the show. But anyways, I'm only giving people this backdrop because when I saw you, I knew this needle through arm, obviously. I did it. And you really shoved a needle through your arm. For those who haven't figured it out, it's a trick. I didn't really shove it through my skin, but it looked like it did. No different than a prosthetic device created for for television or movies. Tim does it. He really shoves a frickin' skewer through his arm, through the other side. Because I'm interested in this stuff and know the truth and the falsehoods, I was mind boggled, like, you got to be kidding me. Then he put it through his muscle, his bicep. I'm going, how is that not painful? But then the coup de grace is when you shove that stinking thing through your mouth and comes out the bottom of your neck. I'm going, I give up. You're the king, brother. That is ridiculous. And then you told me you wanted to shove the thing through your liver. I go, this guy's taking it to new dimensions. So kudos to you. And I'm going to show you something. So all you who stumble upon this book, get it. He mentioned Jim Rose Sideshow that happened in the 90s and was on the Lollapalooza tour. So this book was written by a guy named Jan Kreger, but Tim here was a co-writer on it, or at least gave him a lot of the background information. I don't know exactly how. But this is the whole story of that sideshow, how they created it, what they did, and everything about the acts. There were some crazy acts on this thing, but I want to show you guys something. This is for Tim's benefit. This is the cool book and the beautiful graphics inside of it. I got this from you. I don't know if you remember you gave this to me. Well, you didn't. I bought it for me, but it says right this. It says, Sato, read and you will know the shocking truth. Very sideshow-esque. Try it at home. Oh, that was one of my lines. Torture King, Tim Cridland, 1998.
There we go, 98. You got the date for it. So
yeah. Now, why am I showing you guys this? Number one, you should know this book if you're interested in this type of phenomenon, because it does talk about it as well as that. But I wanted to tell you this personally. One of the most one of the things that I was most proud of in my life. I've had quite an eclectic career. I've been a professional magician, sideshow performer, comic, actor, author, MC. I mean, I've done a lot I'm a Renaissance man. But one of my proudest moments was you giving me this book and you signed it, Sato.
There you go.
And I'll tell you why. Because that to me was you, who are a legit sideshow guy, and I hope you take that as a compliment.
Yeah, sure.
You're one of the legit, and do it at levels that virtually nobody else. I don't know anybody that does what you're doing. And you had the right and the authority to let me in the club if you chose, and you did. You didn't say Brad. You said, Sato, you're one of us. And that made me so proud, because that's what I was trying to honor, was that form, that genre of entertainment, as obscure and odd as it is. And I just wanted you to know that it's like, I'm part of the sideshow folks in Silver, because I came from that, from the Carney background. So the Jim Rose sideshow, you guys mainstreamed stuff that had not typically been done mainstream. And I know it was kind of in the rock and roll culture, and there was an element of the counterculture, I guess, involved. But that show really reintroduced the world to that sort of lost art. And I guess it vanished, but now there's a documentary out.
Yeah, I was saying the beginnings of the show, I worked with the guy who wrote the main part of the book. Jan Greger was the road manager for the original show, and there was a kind of a split at a certain point where a lot of people left the show. And when we put together the book, and eventually, I didn't think this could ever happen, but during pandemic times, another friend of mine from way back, and a friend of Jan's from way back, from when we all lived in Eastern Washington, might I say, put together, he worked on a film already, a documentary, and we put together a documentary based on the same material, the Circus of the Scars, same name. It went through film festival circuit. It won 6 Best Documentary Awards. And I can't say for certain when it's going to happen, but we've got some interest from a major streaming company, which I'm not going to name right now because I don't really know for sure, but this seems to be happening. And it may be out pretty soon on one of the major streaming platforms, I guess you call them. So Circus of the Scars will get, and it's got, now the thing is, I had a small video camera at the time. It was a new thing. It was so new that it doesn't exist anymore. It's a high 8 millimeter video camera, which fit in the palm of your hand, where they used to be these giant things. Remember this time of pre-digital things. So we have some backstage footage and behind the scenes footage, as well as all kinds of different things, interviews with everybody that complements this, and it gets it all within a 90-minute documentary, so pretty digestible, and gives you the full story of how that show all began. And it did, because I realized there's a whole line from this show, even though it began kind of counterculture to the mainstreaming, coming into shows like when they reintroduced Guinness World Records and Stanley's Superhumans and things like that, had been vanished from the public airwaves, that type of thing on TV for decades. And then it seemed to bubble up to the public, consciousness, up to the mainstream. So it seems to be the case that this kind of revived the sideshow, or the type of stream acts for the modern world. And I think some people are involved in it now don't even realize that's the case. They just kind of, in fact, here's a funny thing. There's a show, kind of an old style carnival show that's been around for forever, World of Wonders, that was originally run by a man named Ward Hall, that did the fairground circuit forever, and it was taken over by somebody else. There was an article that said, like, oh, he's getting the sideshow performers off of their traditional rock club venues and putting them into the fairgrounds. Quite unique. They changed the venue, so now it's so, in this article, it's so used to having sideshow performers performing in rock venues. It seems to be the main venue now. It's totally flipped it, and changing it to a carnival seems to be, according to the journalist of this article, to be a quite unique thing, that you can move this out of a rock venue into the carnival, when we actually did it the other way around. Back then, it was like the dying art of the carnival sideshow had been reinvented for the rock crowd. So.
Don't you think, though, one of the things I find interesting with the new culture, the woke culture, if we want to use a simple terminology that people would get, is that an ironic thing happened, is that a lot of the sideshow type performers, though, and I get it, they used to call them freak shows, right? And they would have a midget or a dwarf or a fat lady or whatever. And somebody decided that this was demeaning to these people. And what a lot of these guys would say is, look, people are going to stare at me whether you like it or not. So you know what I'd like to do? How about if I cash in on it? I would like to make some money. It's kind of none of your business. I don't care if I just did a movie that's been out this Christmas on Rumble called Jingle Smells, and one of the actors is a midget. Now, I use that word. I know people consider that derogatory. That's what he calls himself. And him and I had a conversation driving to the airport. He was a professional wrestler, one of these WEF or whatever you call it type of guys. And I said, what do you call yourself? And he goes, I'm a midget. I've made more money leveraging that word, it's what do I care? So there's almost this interesting phenomenon where those who have a very leftist agenda have decided to feel sorry for people without their permission and have actually hindered their work. It's like, hey, if I want to call myself a midget and make money off of it, leave me alone. So I'm sure you've been around these types of people. Have you ever seen an actual out of people's supposedly concern for their dignity, that they've actually done more harm than good in allowing these types of shows and these types of displays to exist?
Well, this goes way back. There was actually a time, it might have been in the 1970s, I think in Florida, they had passed a law that you couldn't exhibit a human being, a handicapped human being, for profit, and they made it illegal for a while. And what happened is you got these people who are out, touring and seeing the world, and took away their livelihood, and then they put them into some institution where they're having a miserable time. Whatever you may think of it. But this basically got overturned because it was in fact unconstitutional, that you can't prevent somebody from choosing to exhibit themselves for a living. This goes through time and time, and you'll see this is like, there was somebody who wrote this is specifically, people who are human oddities, I'd call them, human anomalies who are exhibiting themselves. But there was a guy who wrote, a college professor, of course, who will do this, wrote this book on freak shows, which a lot of people like, and I read it, and it's like, he's calling it, it's the pornography of the disabled. This is a phrase he came up with. And it's all like this. And it's like, exactly what's said here. People are going to, that's what many people with the physical anomalies say, is that people are going to stare. So why not? Why not?
Yeah, sure.
And I know people who exactly this, who have some physical differences. And it was exactly this, a guy who was staying at home and is getting some government checks, staying at home in his room, and then all of a sudden he gets on a sideshow. He's touring just with these rock festivals, and he's meeting all these rock stars. He's having a great time.
Yeah.
Maybe do get a time, so you can't, it's a personal choice of the person who's going to do this.
Do you think there's anything off limits? Do you think there's anything that you would think, being as this is your genre, I think I know your answer, but I don't, and let me give you an example, and I don't care about this, but there was one particular guy, for example, in the Jim Rose show, forgot what his name was, but he is the guy that did the regurgitation, whatever you called it. But this guy found a way to pump your stomach. There's some kind of plunger device, and they shove it down your nose. Your stomach pump, not pleasant. But they put it down your nose, down your throat, I guess. I don't know, do they pour stuff in first and suck it out? Anyways.
I could give you it's like a giant piston. He started out doing this, he got it's kind of a dare. It's just like, the guy is actually a very intelligent guy. He's a licensed pharmacist, working in the pharmacy industry, a very smart guy. And also a very eclectic guy, got some interest, and some friend of his was in the medical profession, got him a big veterinary syringe, and kind of as a dare, he thought he'd do this as a kind of stunt to get a huge amount of like a beer right down the nose, straight down into the stomach, and develop this. And I actually talked him into doing this for the first time in public in a show I did, a very small show in Seattle. And then when we did the Jim Rose Circus sideshow, it got huge. He made this huge kind of syringe thing, but it was like get a whole 40-ounce of beer and mix other things in there, Malox and other things, and just like put it into his stomach, and in a matter of seconds, and then he would reverse the process. It was a lavage and gavage, apparently, professionally speaking, medically, but and I think the part you're going to go to is eventually we suggested this happening, and then people began to do it. And what happened was like, well, you put it out, so we put some, squirted it into some beer glasses and offered it up to the audience, not thinking anybody would take us up on it. And sure enough, it became a thing that people would fight for it. And we even have, this is in the documentary Circus of the Scars, some of the rock stars, Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, we were touring with at the time, would come on stage and drink the contents of another person's stomach, which I think that's not a good idea.
No.
That's not something you'd want to do. But if they want to do it, you know.
So do you think, though, that there should be any limitations? Can you think of any type of person's physical state or mental state or phenomenological? Can you think of anything in your mind you'd say, I think that shouldn't be displayed?
Well, there's things that people are doing that are dangerous. Somebody could even say this about me. I've done things which could potentially be lethal. I have had cars, big like SUVs, run over the top of me, drive over me while I'm on a bed of nails. And I did this once on live TV in England, and it was so much pressure on top of me, I passed out when it went over the top of me on live TV. But what could have been worse if the vehicle had fallen off the ramps that were over the top of me and fallen on me, could have paralyzed me or something like that. And there's always been like people doing dangerous things. If you look at some old films of people doing really inane stunts, wing walkers and things like that, some of them which turn into lethalness. And this is one thing people get concerned about, and people also, well, what if kids are going to imitate you? I say, well, what if a kid sees a motorcycle stunt show and then goes home and tries to jump over their friends on their, this happens all the time. Kids go and they get their bicycles and try to do these big jumps, and sometimes they get hurt. And, you got to give people some,
Hey, let me ask you,
you can't stop people from doing things, and you've got to give them
you're saying maybe if there would be a limit, it would be something that literally could cause death.
No, I say, do you see this all the time, though? You see things, kind of stunts that could cause death. But I say, when people say, are you afraid that people are going to imitate you? And I say, well, they'll probably stop soon. Maybe they'll start, but they'll stop very quickly.
Yeah.
I want to say, there's a point, some things I lost here of the, and I'll mention, I did kind of talking about the physical, mental aspects of it. I have been tested several times by a pain medicine clinic in UCLA, and in Japan on a TV show where they did brain scans of me while I'm doing some of my stunts, the pain control stunts, and they're showing there's actually physical, measurable differences in my brain state when I'm doing this. There are things that are happening internally and things, not just the external thing you see me do. I am doing things internally, more difficult to display so much or explain. So one thing is like, there are things, there's another guy in the show, Mr. Lifto, did something where he'd hang an object from a certain appendage. He'd do ears and things like that, but then it would go down below, go down south, and some people would be upset by this. You're showing some type of nudity and things, but put it in the context of the warning. There's things you don't want. When I do my stunts on TV, and sometimes they have, usually they're going to do not try these things at home. Sometimes they blur out what I'm doing. They have me on TV to do this, and then they blur out the actual stunt itself. I give people enough sense. This is maybe a fault of mine to make up their own mind about what they're going to do. To have, so people's parents should teach them, there are things out there that if you do it, you could get hurt. And of course, there are examples of people getting hurt very badly doing certain things. Right now in Sideshow, there are people who are doing sword swallowing, who have gotten very hurt doing sword swallowing. It's a real deal. And when I was first, getting into it, it was very rare. and I didn't actually realize what the full dangers of it could be. Like a simple scratch in the esophagus can turn into an infection very, very quickly. So, uh, and I even think some of the people who are like trying to debunk some of this or downplay it, or it's like it's simple physics, it's all this, and make it seem less dangerous than it is. And in fact, some of these physics professors will be doing these demonstrations in their classroom, and they end up getting be hurt. There's some humorous one where a guy has gotten a concrete block in his stomach, has one of his students come and a little bit of a mishap where it ends up hitting him
In the crotch. I think I've seen that one.
Yes, there's a few of these.
So here's what I'm curious about. As we get close to wrapping it up, too, I appreciate your time. It's been very interesting, as I knew it would be, and I'm sure people are finding this eclectic conversation to be quite out of the box. So, because this is my world was, so I have quite a extensive library of these techniques and so forth as well. And yet, part of what impressed me about you, Tim, was, you were doing things I had never seen any precedent for. I didn't come across it. Maybe it mentioned it haphazardly in Monster Midway, but a lot of these older books really don't go into detail. They're really not, if you're going to try to learn from some of them, you're probably going to get hurt because they just don't tell you the true ins and outs of what you're about to experience. But, when pushing it through and down here, I guess maybe I've seen photos of fakirs doing that or whatever, or through the cheeks. But there's also fake versions of that. But stuff like that, I don't even know, did you just sort of hear about it and you just experimented to figure out how to do it? Or did you find, one of the things that always interested me was, for example, was the regurgitator, the guy that would drink the liquid and then spew it out. And I was always interested, how does he do that? I want to see if I can learn to do that. It just seemed, that's my mentality, guys like you and I that say, I want to do that, not just read about it. And I saw David Blaine start doing regurgitation with frogs and everything. It's like, man, where did he find those answers? So did you just have to experiment, or did you find some obscure techniques that were taught somewhere in literature or somebody?
Well, I'll tell you the one going through under the tongue and out under the chin, which I believe I'm like the first person to in a Western culture to bring this particular one into the world of entertainment, shall we say, or probably a public exhibit of that. I was getting, this is the 90s, and we have different methods of communication, which involves like mailing things written on paper, and people don't even remember this anymore. But because I had an extensive network of weird information from way back. I actually had a fanzine on a weirdology, so to speak. Way back when in the 80s, I was part of the zine culture, where you had a whole network of people who trade things through the mail. And when it became, that I was doing this type of thing, there was somebody who was sending me these medical journals from Jordan, as well as photographs. It was part of the 14 kind of weirdology network I had. And this guy knew I was interested in and kept sending me these, including photographs, including that particular thing happening in a religious ritual in Jordan. And I was fascinated by that. And it just became, I had the knowledge of the skin and things like this. And then I had anatomy books that I went through. I wanted to know exactly what's going to happen if I put something through there. And, I had built up some, of course, pain control, some knowledge of that. And, but there's a point where it's just like, well, I'm going to have to just do this one day. And I had a friend of mine who he manufactured body piercing jewelry. And he was the one who made all my skewers, which are actually surgical stainless, steel, sharpened up wires, which are all sterilized as using kind of modern body piercing techniques to keep everything sterile. And one day I just had to do this just to see what's going to happen. So And the first time, a little more traumatic, a little more surprise to it. But that's a lot of this was that you read, especially the old books you're talking about, would tell you things which
Yeah.
were just not true. It
Yeah.
was like I would even follow some of these old books. There's a difference, as you must know, about telling somebody how something is done and telling somebody how to do something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was a lot of going on in these books of like, oh, well, there's nothing to this. It's just like that. And it would be somebody just reprinting what somebody else had said from
Yeah.
years
Yeah. And
ago.
it definitely didn't have the detail. And for to do that type of physical phenomenon, you really need somebody that can make you do it
It's
properly.
very helpful, very helpful. And
Yeah.
at the point I was learning it, it was very difficult to find.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, that's why I was curious about that, because I just couldn't understand where you even came up with it, because I
well,
was,
I tried to get personal advice whenever I could, but it
yeah.
became very difficult. Like I learned fire eating when I was like 17 or so, and I had this book on how to do it. It's a very classic book on how to do fire eating, one of the rare ones at the time. But I didn't want to proceed without actually talking to somebody who did it, and I ended up meeting these people in a circus, the Wenatchee Youth Circus was in Washington State at the time. And I went backstage at a circus and said, "Hey, I'm interested in doing this. I want to show you that, I've done all this research. Is there anybody who can help me?" There were people there who did help me. I was
Mm,
lucky for that. When I
yeah.
saw the power team, it was like I was I think 19 or so. They came to the campus. I grew up in a small college town. My dad was a professor at, and they came, and it was the first time I'd seen a lot of these live performances of
Yeah.
these strongman stunts. And it's the first time I'd ever even heard about blowing up a hot water bottle, which was
Yeah.
like a big and that was amazing to me. And uh, eventually we end up having somebody in our show. Guy would blow up a hot water bottle, figured out how to do it, the techniques of it. And but again, a lot of it was very lost in time and
Yeah.
things that were so old that it does not even seem possible. But there's a point where you do the research, you just got to take the jump,
Yeah, no, that's
you know.
true. I learned that with sword swine. Well, listen, is there a place that people, if they ever want to see your act live, do you have a website? Do you have some way that they could sort of try to find you?
The best way is if you go Facebook, Zamora the Torture King. You can just put in Zamora the Torture King. You'll find me. I've got a fan page, and my name, Tim Cridland, Cridland.
Yeah.
You'll find me there as well. I've got somebody talked me into getting an Instagram page up. I've been putting things up there as well. I used to have a regular show here in Las Vegas. The hotel I was performing in, I got closed during the pandemic and didn't reopen, so I don't have any regular shows happening right now. But I'm always able to do private events, and I can travel.
Yeah.
You have to
Well,
bring
and
me out
people can hire you if they want to bring you in for some
yeah,
special event or something that
absolutely.
really is unique.
I know I've been traveling. I know how to travel light with a show it'll give you an hour-long show that'll shock people with I can bring it on. I know all the techniques of getting the stuff on airplanes. Shocking.
Well, folks, like I said, I mean, I'm very familiar with this world and do some of the things that he does, but not even close to the amount. So, yeah, it's not for everybody. I mean, it's definitely a unique subculture. But if you really want something that's just amazing and fascinating and one of a kind, probably not for children, but definitely something that you won't forget. Well, listen, I have to do my last question. Now, this is my subscriber question for people who want to join the militia of the mind and be part of the mighty 10,000. So we're going to ask that, but that's something that only people will see who have joined forces with us. And this will be the question. So with all of the places you've been, all the things that you have done, I need to know, tell me the story of the worst thing that ever happened to you, the worst result that ever took place with all of the crazy things that you've done that was most devastating, potentially life threatening or whatever. What was the worst story you can remember of all the things you've done in your crazy career?
If you're asking the worst injuries I've received, I can give you a kind of a list. My brag has always been I've never had to stop a show.
Zamora the Torture King, thank you, man, for coming on my podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you
And
for
giving
inviting me.
us
Thank you for
this
thinking of me.
esoteric information. Next time in Vegas, I'll try to look you up. Folks, like I said, I like to bring everybody on from every walk of life. I don't care what they think or what they believe, as long as they're interesting and we can have a great conversation. I think that's so important, especially now in this culture where everybody wants to be in conflict, everybody wants to hate each other. How about we just try to find ways to get along, even if we have different points of view? I mean, isn't that what freedom was all about? So that's why I always tell you, PC free is liberty. If you're really a free thinker, you really care about truth, and you really care about speaking liberty, you got to be able to offend people. That's just the way it works. That's what used to be called maturity. And so we need to be that guy. I do that as a comic and as someone who tries to entertain, but also has a dimension of life I think are important and matters, and that's what I speak about. So, folks, this is God's Comic Brad Stine. This is Brad Stine Has Issues, and I'm just doing what I always do, putting the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday.